Hello everybody and welcome to the Vancouver Aquarium and to Northern Spotlights, the talk show that takes us north with the Vancouver Aquarium. I'm your host, Natalie, and joining me today is the wonderful Susan Archibald. She's the Senior Vice President of External Relations here at the Vancouver Aquarium. She's been with the aquarium for about 5 years now, connecting people all around the world with our story. And this year, she had the unique opportunity to head up to the Arctic with some of our researchers on their expedition. And it was her first trip to the Arctic. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Well, I was very lucky to go to the Arctic this year, and the reason for that is that in being involved in external relations, our job is to really connect people to the issues that are taking place out in the environment, and of course the Arctic is changing. We need our North, and the North needs us. And so it was very, very lucky for me to be able to go on an expedition to the Arctic along with some of our donors and some of the people that are very interested in getting more involved with the aquarium in the Arctic.
Wonderful. So it was a 12-day trip?
It was a 12-day expedition with a company called One Ocean Expeditions. The aquarium takes a group of individuals to the Arctic. We're going back again this August, August 12th to 24th. And it was a fantastic journey. We basically arrived in Greenland, the west coast of Greenland, in a place called Kangerlussuaq. Very hard to say that. It's at the end of one of the longest fjords in the world, and we got on the research vessel and came out that fjord and then up the west coast of Greenland.
Oh, wonderful.
We stopped in Sisimiut and Ilulissat, and then we crossed Davis Strait and arrived in the first Canadian point of the Arctic, which was Pond Inlet. And then we worked our way through the Northwest Passage. So it was very interesting to take a journey that was so historical, ending up in Cambridge Bay eventually, with lots of stops along the way, getting off the ship every day to do hikes or to kayak, to get amongst the ice, to find animals from the Arctic. It was absolutely extraordinary.
Wonderful. I know a member of our audience, JN from Burnaby, wants to know sort of the modes of transportation. Was it mainly ships you used to get around?
Well, we started in Ottawa, actually, and took a charter from Ottawa to Greenland. And then when we arrived in Greenland, they have a big airport there. It was sort of a big airport. Small community. And then from there we got on a bus, and from that bus it took us down to the port, and then we loaded onto Zodiacs. So Zodiacs take about 12 people per Zodiac, maybe a few more than that, and they...
Now, correct me, Zodiacs are the sort of blow-up boats?
They're like the blow-up boats, yeah.
Okay.
So rubber tubes with an engine in the stern, and so we loaded onto the Zodiacs, and then from there crossed out onto the ship and then loaded onto the ship. So we were on the ship for the 12 days, but every day we would get off via the Zodiacs or via kayaks and explore the Arctic.
And so in terms of preparation for a trip to the Arctic, when it comes to even just the layers of clothing that you need, what kind of preparation did you need to do? Layers
is the trick.
Yeah.
we basically packed like we were going skiing, except for doubling everything.
Okay.
And so the One Ocean provides you with your outer gear, but you need to wear all of your inner gear. So I basically wore in the kayak a pair of long underwear, and then I wore fleece pants, and then I wore a dry suit on top of that.
Wow.
On my feet, I had 2 pairs of socks plus dry suit booties, and then neoprene booties on top of that.
Oh my goodness, it must be quite the adventure, even just getting dressed in the morning.
You felt a little, like a Michelin man kind of.
Yeah.
Lots of layers, but actually very comfortable. It never really got below 0. It was sort of between 0 and 10 degrees for most of the time. But when the winds came up or when it got a little bit misty, it got chilly. So you had to be prepared for sure.
Yeah, definitely have to be prepared because there's not much contact once you're out there.
That's right.
But when it comes to your first impressions, because this was your first trip to the Arctic, what was your first impression when you finally got there?
Stunning. It was absolutely beautiful. The air was cool and crisp. The light was clear. The clarity of seeing everything, the vastness of where you were looking. There was just, you would look forever and not see anyone or anything really. It was just an absolutely extraordinary experience. Lots of icebergs, which were amazing. and tundra that was, had tiny little plants or tiny little lichens growing. It was extraordinary.
And you were there in the summer, so that means daylight all the time?
Daylight 24/7. And so it was really weird when at 10:30 at night you're sitting there and you think, oh, I guess I better go to bed. It's 10:30. But it was bright, like it was noon.
Got to set an alarm to go to bed and set an alarm to get up.
Absolutely. That was really, really interesting to me. But then again, it also led to that beautiful light. So you were taking photographs all the time. It was just extraordinary. Yeah.
I guess that's the best thing about having daylight all the time is you have so much time to take in the scenery because it never really gets dark.
Yeah.
But I know when you were out on the water, you did experience some wildlife. Now, the first thing I think of when I think of the Arctic is polar bears. Did you manage to see any polar bears?
We saw polar bears. It was amazing, absolutely amazing to see polar bears in the wild. And we got quite close to the polar bears. We were in the Zodiacs, so we were with our expedition leaders. We weren't allowed to go on land when there are polar bears there because, polar bears like to eat people. And so we were escorted wherever we were, but the polar bears were hunting, and they found themselves, we actually observed them eating beluga.
Oh, wow.
And that was extraordinary. And so polar bears, beluga, polar bears eating beluga, we saw snowy owl, we saw muskox. It was absolutely amazing.
Incredible. So you got to see a polar bear feeding.
We saw a polar bear feeding, so it was really interesting because this particular polar bear didn't look that healthy to me. You could see sort of bones because he was kind of bony. It was summertime, and it's hard for the polar bears to find food in the summer because they normally hunt from the ice. And so this polar bear, luckily enough, had come across some beluga that the Inuit had hunted the day before, or perhaps, I'm not sure exactly when they had hunted it.
I was going to say, because I noticed the cuts on the beluga are very straight.
Absolutely. We didn't understand that at first, but we had an Inuit person from Pond Inlet with us who told us about how the Inuit would hunt the beluga, and they basically harvested the blubber and the skin, and they left the rest of the meat. And that was because it was too heavy for them to take with them. But the wonderful thing about that was that then the polar bears came along and benefited from that.
Wow, an amazing experience. But they were emaciated because it was summertime?
I believe so. I'm not an expert on polar bears, but yes.
So you weren't too nervous when you met the polar bear, but did you have any times during your trip where you kind of thought, this is a little bit scary, or did you meet any animals that you were a little bit worried about or anything like that?
Well, no, we were very well looked after. So in terms of animal and wildlife, we felt safe all the time.
Okay.
We did have one experience in Greenland where we were out in the Zodiacs exploring the icebergs where the tide changed. And so as we were trying to get into Ilulissat, which was on the northwestern end of Greenland, the most northwesterly point, the ice started to move in, and we were starting to feel like it was going to trap us if we didn't get out. So
would that be the case if you hadn't moved quick enough?
Absolutely. That's what happened with the Franklin expedition, and that's what happens often if you are not careful. The ice, it's all the little ice floes are being pushed in by the tide, and you're in your Zodiac. So we had to navigate our way around the ice in order to get out from being trapped in the ice.
Okay, but you made it out.
We made it out, and it was absolutely fine, but it was a poignant moment because you started to understand what it was like to be an early explorer in the Arctic and getting trapped in the ice.
Because we know a lot more now than they did with their expeditions.
Absolutely.
And you had expert guides the whole way through.
We had expert guides, and yes, we had navigation aids, and we had charts. They didn't. They were making the charts.
Even something as simple as charts, they made the charts.
They were making the charts. We were benefiting from their making of the charts.
Well, with all our work in the Arctic, we team up with local Arctic communities. What did you discover about the Arctic way of life that maybe surprised you?
It was fascinating. The people are extremely friendly. They live off the land. They live off the animals from the land. And so there's a very, very strong connection between the environment and the communities. We were interested to learn about what foods they harvested in each month, and that was
you
also
can
very
see that
interesting.
in the diagram.
Yeah, we have that diagram where it actually shows the animals and the ones that they hunt. So that was very fascinating. The other thing I noticed was that in the summertime, it's harder for them to get around because there's a lot of water. In the wintertime, when there's ice, that ice becomes their highway, and that becomes their ability to connect with other communities. And so that was a very interesting point for me, was understanding that the ice that we always think at wintertime, we sort of stay home and sit by the fire or watch TV or maybe not go out as much. These people actually go out because they hunt on the ice and they use the ice highway to get to other communities and visit family and friends.
Wow, so the winter is really when the Arctic becomes a social hub.
It does become a social hub in the winter. It was also a social hub in the summer, so I'm not sure what the contrast is there, but
Yeah.
that was an interesting point for me.
That's incredible. So it seems that the animals and the people both rely so heavily on the sea ice. Now, how have the scientists and the communities that you met maybe spoken to you about how that's changing?
It is changing, and it's changing rapidly. Ice in the Arctic is melting, is melting 2 times faster than anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
And because the animals rely on the ice in order to be able to hunt, and because the communities rely on the ice in order to be able to travel, it impacts them very, very severely.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of research in the Arctic. One of our researchers, Dr. Valeria Vergara, has been working with beluga whales and understanding the contact calls between mother calves and their mothers and their calves. And so she was up in the Arctic this year learning more about that information, which she initially discovered here at the aquarium. Because we have belugas here, they were able to recognize and identify specialized contact calls like a mother and a baby would have in belugas, and she's now taken that into the field and discovered that. So that's very, very important information. As the Arctic opens up and the ice is melting and you start to see increased resource development, increased shipping traffic, the noise from ships going by, what impact will that have actually on the beluga whale population? What impact will the melting ice have on the other animals in the Arctic? So that's very, very important.
And it's so important to have accurate and also local informed research on this subject. And the Vancouver Aquarium has been researching about and in the Arctic for over 50 years now.
That's right.
How does the Vancouver Aquarium tie into that with our Arctic campaign at the moment?
Well, we are actually in an Arctic campaign. We're raising $28 million for a new Canada's Arctic Gallery. The result of that will be a beluga habitat that will be about 2.5 times the size of the current one we have, so a much larger habitat for the belugas, but also more interpretive information and more demonstration of what it's like to live in the Arctic, so that we can help to share that information to people who may not have the chance to get to the Arctic, and help them understand how important the Arctic is to everybody.
So we're connecting people with stories, but also being able to do that essential groundwork research here that can then be transferred up to the Arctic as well.
Absolutely critical. And so we do have another expedition going this summer if anybody is interested. We also have some information about the Arctic and the Arctic campaign on our website /Our North. So people can go to www.vanaqua.org/Our North, and you can learn more about all of the different work that we're doing in the Arctic and the capital initiative for upgrading our facilities.
So do we know what's next with regards to research for the next Arctic trip?
Yes, we'll have some of our scientists on board. It's always very important for us to continue to conduct research there, so we'll be doing some hydrology work. Dr. Vergara will be going back up into the Arctic to do more work on belugas.
Okay.
And we have all sorts of other information experts on board the ship, and so there's lots of lectures every day, and so there's lots of learning and lots of research going on. Eric Solomon, our Director of Arctic Programs, is up in the Arctic now, actually, and he goes up a number of times. He's working with some of the youth in a program called Aquarium, which is basically helping to build capacity on research and science up in the Arctic.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Susan. I feel like I've learned so much about a first trip up to the Arctic and even just about life up there for the
That's
communities. So a huge thank you to Susan,
welcome.
our Senior VP of External Relations, for being here today. And thank you everyone here who has joined us for our Arctic Spotlight. If you'd like to learn more, just as Susan was saying, about our Arctic commitments, you can head to our website, vanaqua.org/Our North, and that will give you all of our Arctic research that's going on at the moment. If you'd like to see another Arctic talk show, the next one coming up will be on Saturday, 12:30 Pacific Standard Time, and we'll be joined by Jeremy Haywood. He is a dive safety officer, so if you're interested in diving, come back for that or log on for that. But my name is Natalie. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.